Rescue German Shepherd hides in corner until the right person comes. Then something shocking happens. The dog would cower in fear whenever someone would approach. Even when people tried to speak gently, its body would tremble with anxiety. It had learned to growl and bark as a defense mechanism, its way of saying, "Stay away from me." Yet the growl was more out of desperation than aggression. The deeper truth was that the dog simply didn't know how to trust anymore. But as the days passed, something in the dog began to change. Its instincts, buried under layers of fear, started to sense that maybe, just maybe, someone out there could be different. But would this person find the dog before it lost all hope? One chilly afternoon, as the sun began to dip beneath the horizon, casting long shadows over the alley, a car pulled up nearby. The sound of the engine sputtered and then cut off, leaving an eerie stillness in the air. Out stepped a man, tall and wearing a jacket with a logo for a local animal rescue organization. He had a calm demeanor and a patient gaze, one that seemed to understand the fear animals like the German Shepherd carried. His name was James. James wasn't a stranger to troubled animals. He had rescued dozens of dogs and cats over the years, dogs who had been abandoned, abused, and left to fend for themselves. He knew how to approach them without causing more distress, how to earn their trust little by little. His mission wasn't just to rescue these animals, but to heal them, to remind them that they could still trust humans. That afternoon, James had heard about the German Shepherd hiding in the corner of the alley. He had seen the warnings from other rescuers who had tried and failed to coax the dog out. But James wasn't deterred. He knew this wouldn't be easy, but he also understood that some animals just needed time and the right person to show up. He didn't rush. He didn't yell. Instead, he crouched low, speaking softly to the dog as he extended his hand slowly. The dog watched him cautiously from its corner, its body tense. James knew it would take more than just a gentle voice. It would take something deeper, something that would make the dog feel safe enough to trust him. James stayed crouched, not moving a muscle, letting the quietness of the alley speak for him. He knew that one wrong move could send the dog further into hiding, so he kept his distance, watching carefully. His voice was soft, barely above a whisper, as he spoke to the German Shepherd, repeating calm words that seemed to resonate with the dog. "Hey there. It's okay. You're safe now," James murmured, his tone low and soothing. He noticed the dog's ears twitch slightly, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of curiosity in its eyes. It was a small sign, but it was something. A spark of recognition that someone was there, someone who was offering safety, not harm. For what felt like an eternity, James didn't move. His heart beat in his chest, but he didn't let it rush his actions. Slowly, he pulled out a small bag of treats from his pocket, something he always kept with him for moments like these. Holding it out, he let the bag rustle gently. The sound was enough to grab the dog's attention. The shepherd's eyes flickered back to the treats, then back to James. It was a delicate dance of trust, one hesitant step at a time. The dog shifted slightly, inching forward, but it stopped just short. Its eyes, wide and wary, never left James. He didn't move, just kept the bag still in front of him, waiting for the dog to make the next move. Minutes passed in silence, the air thick with anticipation. Then, like a breath of relief, the dog made its first real move. Slowly, cautiously, it approached. The German Shepherd took another tentative step forward, its paws shifting on the gravel as it closed the distance between them. James could feel his heart racing. This was the moment. He had to stay calm. As the dog edged closer, James didn't breathe any harder, didn't make any sudden movements. Every part of him was focused on what was happening now. The dog sniffed the air, its nose twitching as it got a whiff of the treats. It paused for a moment, staring at the small bag that James held out, then finally took another step forward. The shepherd's eyes flickered briefly to the ground, as if contemplating the offer. James felt a quiet thrill of hope. He knew this was a pivotal moment. The dog had to decide if it could trust him or if it would retreat again. Finally, the dog stretched its neck forward, its nose bumping the bag of treats. And for the first time, there was no hesitation. It gently took the treat from James's hand. The sensation of the warm, soft fur brushing against his skin was enough to make his breath catch. For the briefest moment, it was as if time had stopped. The bond had begun to form, trust, built on something as simple as food, but with much deeper meaning. James couldn't help but smile, relief flooding through him. The German Shepherd wasn't just hungry, it was reaching out too. Slowly but surely, a fragile connection had been made. This wasn't just about the treats. It was about the dog deciding to trust him. As the German Shepherd finished the treat, it hesitated, its eyes darting between James and the quiet corner where it had spent the last few days hiding. It was clear that the dog wasn't entirely convinced yet, but James could see something in those eyes. A flicker of curiosity, a spark of trust beginning to form. He knelt down slowly, making himself as small and non-threatening as possible. The last thing he wanted was for the dog to feel cornered or overwhelmed. He didn't rush, but he kept his voice soft and steady. "It's okay. You're safe here." The dog looked at him, then back at the corner, before it took a few cautious steps toward him. James stayed still, his heart pounding, waiting to see what it would do. There was a sense of urgency in the air, as though the dog knew it had to make a decision. The German Shepherd's body language was still tense, but it was moving forward, not retreating. It was a subtle change, but a significant one. With each step it took toward James, the dog seemed to let go of a little more of its fear. It was learning that the world could be safe, that not all humans were a threat. And in that moment, James felt a profound connection with this animal, one that couldn't be put into words. The dog finally reached him, standing just a few feet away. It looked up at James, its tail still low but not rigid. James extended his hand once more, and the dog, with a cautious but determined movement, nudged it gently. There it was, the beginning of something beautiful. The moment the dog nudged James's hand, a wave of relief washed over him. It wasn't much, just a soft push of the dog's nose against his palm, but to James it felt like a small victory. For days the German Shepherd had been wary, frightened of anyone who came near. But now for the first time, it was showing signs of trust. It was as if a barrier had started to crack. James remained still, his heart racing. He knew this was a critical moment, a fragile one. If he made the wrong move, the dog could retreat into its shell again, possibly never trusting anyone again. He took a deep breath, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He gently stroked the dog's head, just above its ears, his fingers brushing through the rough fur. At first, the German Shepherd flinched slightly, its body tensing up. James froze, not wanting to push it too far. He gave the dog time to adjust, to process the touch. Then slowly the dog leaned into the contact. The tension in its body began to loosen, and for the first time James saw a small wag of its tail. It was a hesitant wag, almost like the dog was unsure if it was allowed to feel this way. But to James, it was everything. This was the beginning of a bond built on trust and patience, not force or fear. The dog was no longer just hiding in the corner, it was beginning to open up. As James sat there, the air heavy with anticipation, he didn't expect what happened next. The German Shepherd, after several moments of tentative trust, suddenly pulled away from him. James's heart sank. Had he done something wrong? Had he ruined the fragile bond they were building? He didn't move, afraid to disrupt whatever fragile piece they had found. The dog, however, didn't run away or retreat to the farthest corner like it had before. Instead, it began pacing back and forth in front of him. Its ears were still alert, its eyes fixed on something in the distance. James could sense that something was different about this moment, something that had shifted in the dog. And then it happened. The dog stopped pacing, turned, and looked James straight in the eyes. For a split second, they locked gazes, and James saw something he hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. The dog wasn't just scared anymore. There was something else in its eyes, something that James hadn't expected, a glimmer of hope. Before he could react, the German Shepherd walked slowly towards him. Without warning, it placed its head on his lap, a quiet gesture that spoke volumes. James froze. The dog was offering trust, something it had never done before. The moment was surreal, one that would forever stay etched in James's mind. It wasn't just the dog reaching out. It was something more profound. The German Shepherd had finally found its savior, and it had chosen James. Days passed and James continued to visit the shelter, always checking on the German Shepherd. The dog had slowly started to open up to him, but still a sense of mystery hung in the air. Why had this dog been so unwilling to trust? What had caused the deep-seated fear in her eyes? One afternoon, James was invited by the shelter staff to sit down with a special volunteer, a woman named Sarah who had worked with this particular dog. Sarah had been the one who first noticed the signs. She had worked with countless animals before, but this one was different. It wasn't just the typical fear from abuse. No, this dog had experienced something much deeper, something far more complex. As James listened to Sarah's story, his heart sank. "Her name is Elsa," Sarah began, her voice soft but heavy. "We believe she was once part of a K-9 unit in another country. She was trained for high-stakes missions, but when things went wrong, her handler abandoned her, left her alone in a foreign place." James could barely believe what he was hearing. Elsa, this beautiful, strong dog, had been betrayed in the most heartbreaking way. She had been trained for danger and survival, but when things got tough, she was discarded, no longer of use to the very people who had relied on her. As Sarah spoke, it became clear that Elsa's distrust wasn't just a product of abuse, but a product of abandonment. She had been left behind when she was no longer needed, and it had broken her in ways that even a professional could barely understand. But there was something in the way Elsa had started to look at James, something he couldn't ignore. She was starting to trust again, slowly but surely, with every visit, every treat, every kind word. Elsa was healing, and so was James. The bond they were forming wasn't just about saving a dog. It was about both of them finding trust and love once again. On the day James decided to officially adopt Elsa, the final moment that solidified their bond occurred. Elsa, who had always hidden in the corners of the room, trembling in fear, finally stood tall. She walked over to James and placed her head gently in his lap, as if to say, "I'm ready." Tears filled James's eyes. It wasn't just the relief of knowing he had finally earned her trust. It was the overwhelming feeling of witnessing a dog, once broken and lost, slowly piecing herself back together. He realized then that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we least expect, the stories of resilience, recovery, and the strength of unexpected friendships. Elsa, the dog who had once been abandoned, had finally found a home. And James, the man who had reached out with kindness and patience, had found a loyal companion for life. They walked out of the shelter together, a new chapter beginning for both of them. Their journey, built on mutual healing, would continue. But no matter what, they knew one thing for sure: they were never going to be alone again.